Warpforge is an upcoming digital collectible card game based on Warhammer 40k universe. I won't be explaining what Warhammer 40k is, because the explanation would take way more time than the topic of this video itself, and also I'm not a lore expert anyway. Warpforge is a brainchild of British-based studio Everguild, well known for such cult classics as Drakenlords and Horus Heresy legends. Well, even though no one ever probably have heard about Drakenlords, it's a pretty decent fantasy-themed collectible card game. It's one of many, it works, there's still people playing it, it's decent-ish. As to Horus Heresy Legends, it's a completely different story. Basically, the Horus Heresy is a prequel sub-franchise of Warhammer 40k. Let's make it clear, Warhammer is a niche. Card game is a niche. It makes Horus Heresy Legends a niche within a niche within a niche game, and yet it performs surprisingly well for such a niche product. Well, at least it did. The Legends community feels a bit stale after the recent Battle Pass commotion, but support is still great. There are still dedicated YouTube content creators, though the number halved this year. In fact, Legends is about to receive a major update soon. I hope this video will come out before the update. The player base of Legends isn't the largest, a niche product, remember, but quite dedicated, and despite on some recent questionable decisions made by Everguild, they deserve praise for how they handled the game. Due to the limited but strong success of Legends, a quad sequel was just a matter of time, or Games Workshop licensing policy. So Warpforge was announced last year, and hopefully it's gonna be released in 2023. The moment Everguild announced Warpforge, they said it's not gonna be a Legends reskin, and guess what? Warpforge turns out to be exactly that. Frankly, most card games are pretty similar, so that's not an issue in my opinion. We have a deck consisting of 30 cards and a warlord. The goal is to kill the enemy's warlord, as simple as that. There's two types of cards, a troop and a stratagem. If card is a troop, it has health points, attack value and various effects. While Legends has only one attack type, Warpforge got two, melee and range. Stratagems are basically spells. It's never about simple math, it's about different effects and synergy between them. Unlike some other card games, warlords are active participants of battles in Warpforge. Also, some cards have special abilities. Here, these abilities are represented by ephemeral cards. Such cards can be generated on your turn and get discarded at the end of it. It's actually important because the maximum quantity of cards in hand is 10, and it can get quite messy if you have a lot of cards with abilities on the board at the same time. You have mana/energy points that you can spend on cards or abilities. Every turn you draw a minimum of one card and your energy points get increased. Some abilities can draw additional cards, and if game goes beyond 10 energy, players draw 2 cards per turn. Unlike Legends, mana pool has no limit in its increase, and fatigue damage is not a thing. That's actually strange because it can lead to stalemate, which can be quite annoying. Let's talk about the presentation for a bit. Warpforge looks pretty good. Card arts are more consistent compared to the ones in Legends, backgrounds are animated and look interesting, zoom outs at the start of the battles are dope. And yet, even though Legends looks a bit cheap and sometimes downright ugly, it's more readable. It's very subjective, I know. Warpforge battlefield is bigger, we have 2 more lines now, everything looks fancier, and unavoidably it dictates smaller size of your eye elements. Additional visual noise doesn't help. It was kinda hard for me to get used to Warpforge, even though its layout is pretty much standard for CCG. Now, when I have 15 hours on record, it feels fine, but it took time. Also remember that Warpforge gonna be a multi-platform release, so some adjustments are inevitable for mobile versions. I hope. As to audio side of things, pretty much every aspect of it is better in Warpforge. Not only do warlords have voice lines now, regular cards have them too.
Get from above! Ready, my legions. A glorious victory will be mine. The dog is going. There ain't no stopping.
Also, voice actors' work is more consistent. By the way, Warpforge has the same 6 emotes interaction system, so don't worry. You can spam emotes here exactly like in Legions. Happy days. The music sounds much better too, especially when you can hear it. I believe there's 2 tracks, one for main menu and one for battle. But the music during the battles sometimes is barely audible for some reason, so don't quote me on that. Let's talk about factions. Currently there's 6, and all of them are sub-factions of bigger entities. For example, the Space Marines are represented with a single chapter, and arguably the most boring one, the Ultramarines, the Eldar, Samhan Craft World, the Necrons, Sautek Dynasty, and so on. Not all Warhammer 40k factions are included, let alone bajillion sub-factions. Well, it's impossible anyway. It means that expansion possibilities are literally endless, especially if Everguild gonna add new chapters, craft worlds, and orc clans and stuff. It's nothing like the Horus Heresy sub-franchise, which is much more restrictive in that regard. Every faction has its own unique quirks. Usually it's a special mechanic that, used right, gives you buffs and lets you put in play additional troops. There's no neutral card pool usable by everyone, at least yet. Potentially it might lead to the situation when everyone who ground long enough to get all the cards gonna have identical decks. Let's talk about every faction a bit now. Take a wild guess who's gonna be first. Yeah, Emperor's finest, the Ultramarines, the boys in blue, zealous servants of the Emperor and all. The special trait is Codex, and it triggers every time you use up all your energy. Like exemplary students, they do everything by the book, Codex Astartes that is. They're always on a front cover and thus hated by everyone, in our boring reality, not in the 40k one. Next faction, the Goths, the biggest and the mightiest orc clan ever. The orcs are well known for their ability to swipe the whole world with the green tide of death and destruction. The numbers are endless, and Warpforge reflects that with the trait Tide that helps the orcs to get the board advantage with ease, spamming several unit types. It's not like it creates balance issues, wink wink. Yeah buddy, sorry, but I can spam my boys all day long. You're screwed. In fact, Tide isn't unique to orcs, but it's not the only trait they have. The orc machines are deadly, but built from scrap. It makes them unstable, and sometimes dangerous for their own ranks. A vehicle that has unstable trait might deal damage to adjacent units after it gets destroyed. Finally, Goths units that have mob trait get boost when a friendly unit performs a melee attack. Apparently orc mirrors are gonna be crazy. Like, hey, I play ludicrous rock invasion that puts in play 8 random troops with a very high chance of some of them having taunt. But look, my opponent plays rock invasion as well. I guess I'm not winning anymore. But wait, I have the Wheel of Gog card and now I'm gonna remove 16 flipping troops from the game. In one turn. Fun. The next one is the Eldar Craft World Samhan. Honestly, the faction is not very interesting. Some of their soldiers leave a spirit stone on the battlefield after they get killed. Being collected, stones can be spent to different supplementary effects. So, in some way it's a secondary energy curve, but not really, because you can't use it freely. Unique Shuriken trait deals additional range damage when unit attacks. Also, Samhan has an abundance of flying units, and flying might be one of the most powerful common traits in the game. And yeah, the Eldar are space elves indeed. The Necrons, the ancient enemy of the Eldar, and all things living in general. The Necrons are cybernetic ancient Egypt-themed undead. It's hard to kill something what is not exactly alive, so Necrons have a lore-friendly mechanic, Remnant. When a card with this trait gets destroyed, Remnant, well, remains on the board for one turn. If you ignore it or your opponent destroys it, it obviously does nothing, but potentially you can reanimate it for cheap, if you have the tools for that, of course. Yeah, another mechanic that definitely doesn't create a problem. Yeah, dude, I'm gonna resurrect my shit every turn. There's nothing you can do, sorry. Also, some Necron units regenerate like crazy. Pretty vigorous for the undead, eh? The Black Legion, the ultimate enemies of the Imperium of Man, the traitor Space Marines that succumbed to chaos and got corrupted long time ago, during the events of Horus Heresy. Unsurprisingly, they can be bestowed Chaos God's blessings via the Mark of Chaos mechanic. And they are also boring. I would prefer Alpha Legion or something, honestly. The last but not least, the Tyranids, ever-morphing insect-like aliens, or should I say Xenos, sharing collective consciousness. The numbers are even greater than the Orcs, so they have the tight thing too. Also, they have the Swarm mechanic that allows them to morph a pair of certain units into one, thus making it stronger and bulkier. Some Tyranid species serve as a conduit of Hive's mind well. It's reflected by the Synapse mechanic. Any buff applied to a Synapse unit also affects units adjacent to it. Essentially, it triples the effect of a buff. Groovy. Honestly, Synapse seems like an overtuned mechanic. At the same time, being fairly melee-oriented faction, Tyranids may struggle against range specialists and flying units. We've already talked about unique mechanics, but there's a lot more general ones. Most of them are pretty standard, like Taunt, Invisibility, Rally, Triggers on Deploy, Stun, and so on and so forth. I see no reason to go in full details here, after all it's just an alpha. Everguild did a good job explaining how it works via card descriptions and icons, though it takes a lot more time to get one's bearings in Warpforge comparing to Legions. Again, everything is smaller, there's more stuff on the screen, etc. Currently there's 3 play modes in Warpforge. Well, 2.5 rather. First of all, you have a tutorial for every faction, and pre-built deck training games with bots. Tutorials are essentially auto-scrollers. You have the controls, but you're on the rails at the same time. I managed to break it by accident anyway though. If you do know how to play CCGs, you probably don't need to suffer through it. Practice game mode lets you play against AI while controlling pre-built deck. It's boring and you don't get rewards for that, but it's actually a better tutorial in my opinion. The multiplayer mode is the main thing. You compete with other players all over the world, if you manage to find someone that is. In case your ranking bracket is too low or there's not enough people playing, you get matched with a bot. AI is pretty basic and dumb, but if your deck is shit or luck is not on your side, you can easily get crushed by a bot all the same. Deck building is pretty much the same in all of Everguild games. Cards have 4 rarity types: common, rare, epic, and legendary. You can include 1 copy of a legendary card and 2 copies of any other card in your deck. As the player who goes first have an advantage, his opponent gets a single-use counterattack card to balance it out. Some counterattack cards are way better than the others, by the way. The Tyranids one lowers the cost of your next troop by 2, and is bonkers. There's no initiative system, so the game decides who goes first by flipping a virtual coin. Unlike multiplayer, in draft mode you need to build your deck from pre-made 3-card packs first. It's all about your luck. You can't reroll them, at least yet, and honestly, some packs are partially or entirely rubbish. Then you need to win 12 games. If you lose 3 times, your run ends. There's no specific reward for completing the run so far, but I have no doubt it will be changed in release version. The reward system and the economy part are almost non-existent at this stage. You just get up to 50 gold for a battle and 3 grand every day. You can spend it on 100 and 200 gold boosters. Cheaper ones can contain any cards, while more expensive ones are faction specific, The system is clearly a temporary measure, and it will be surely reworked in the future. Some tabs like Social, Cosmetics and Card Store are not even active yet, so there's nothing to talk about. Even though players do have a set of nice looking card backs, I expect that the current cards and cosmetic collections will be scrapped after release anyway. In conclusion, I'd like to say that I don't have high hopes for Warpforge, but neither I expect a disaster. I'm pretty sure that Everguild are competent enough in making CCGs. The game looks and sounds good, even though not astonishingly good. As to readability, it might be a subjective thing, and it's not hard to fix anyway. Warpforge is probably gonna be either decent or good. The two things that could possibly cripple it are bad advertising and greedy in-game economy. Likely due to Games Workshop licensing policy, the sole direct competitor of Warpforge is Warhammer Combat Cards. And, you know, it doesn't require much to leave such a competitor behind. Let's not talk about combat cards here. After all, at least initial influx of players from Legions is guaranteed, and it might be just enough to jumpstart the game. I doubt the base gameplay will change much, and even though the current state of the balance is wonky, it should be a manageable task to refine it enough to make it bearable. It's not clear when exactly the game is going to be released, but Everguild says it's this year. We all know what release dates in gaming industry be like though. Anyway, it's pretty safe to assume that the core mechanics of Warpforge on release will stay very close to what they are now. The biggest mystery is economy, including whether will crafting be a thing or not. We'll see. Thank you for watching and take care.